Well, thank you very much. If you allow me, without further ado, because I guess that we are out of schedule, probably. Without further ado, I would like to thank the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy for the invitation today. And I would also like to thank them for the involvement they have in order to work out the situation we have in Catalonia and the dispute that we have between Catalonia and Spain. Today we found out that you have sent a letter to Mr. Pedro Sánchez and to Mr. Zapatero, former members of the advisory board of ICD. And in this letter, you tell them that there is an initiative to set up a Catalan Center for Cultural Diplomacy. And this is something good and something that can help to find a political solution to a social and political dispute. You have listened to many speakers, and probably you know a bit more about our situation and why we have reached this point. But according to my personal and political experience, and just to sum up some ideas, I would like to convey 4 or 5 messages, very briefly. The first one links with the title of the talk. The first one is that the Catalan movement, the Catalan political movement, is a grassroots level movement. This is a very important thing to keep in mind. That means that it was not created, it was not thought, it was not built by political parties. It stems from people. It really stems from people, with huge demonstrations. Imagine a country of 7.5 million people with 7 consecutive demonstrations of more than 1.5 million people every year, peacefully. Compare the situation with the situation in your countries. Imagine the proportion of this movement. So what is the first obligation, the first duty of the political leaders? To listen to people, to find out what is really happening, and to reach the conclusion if people want a real change of the heading of a country, of the political heading of a country. And this is our case. It was not like this years ago. The majority of the people in Catalonia were, I would say, comfortable with sharing a political life with the rest of Spain. Of course, we always wanted to develop our self-government. This is something that stems from the Middle Ages, and it is still the will of the majority of the Catalan people to have our own home rule and to have real powers in order to drive a specific project for the whole of our population. This is quite evident. But in our mind, this issue was compatible with a cooperation within Spain. And this is what we did for decades. We helped all the Spanish governments, all, to take the most important decisions that Spain has had to take in the last 2 or 3 decades. So the first message I would like to convey is this is a real grassroots level movement. And not only, as I said, huge demonstrations, I would also like to underline that all the demonstrations have been strictly peaceful. And I would also like to stress that people have self-organized to do that. I have heard many times when I was in office and I had close relationships with many people in Europe and with other governments and with other politicians. It was always a normal and clear message that it was a local, a regional, a domestic issue. They told me, well, okay, but you have to work it out within Spain. This is not a European issue. This is your issue. And probably if you analyze what is still happening in Catalonia, and you realize that this is, as I said, a grassroots level movement driven directly driven by people. This is something that refers to democracy. This is something that refers to principles. This is something that refers to values. And therefore, this is something that refers to the construction of Europe and to the essence of Europe. It is not only a domestic affair. Of course it is a domestic affair, but not only a domestic affair. It is also a European affair. The second message I would like to share with you: how many people, especially considering demographic changes and immigration trends, want independence from Madrid? I would say we don't know offhand. We have an approximate idea, but we don't know, because it is, as you can realize, very difficult, extremely difficult, to hold a binding and representative referendum. Because the Spanish central institutions don't accept the idea of a referendum on the issue that a lot of people in Catalonia put on the table. But it is important to highlight that this will for self-determination, this shared will for self-determination in Catalonia, stems from a country that is not a country with only people who have born in the country. If you analyze the social structure of Catalonia, 7.5 million people, as I said, more than 50% of these people have not born in Catalonia, or their parents were not born in Catalonia. As a matter of fact, 70% of the current Catalan people have direct non-Catalan roots. So, the conclusion: this is not an ethnical issue. It is a cultural one. This is why it is peaceful, because it is not technical. It is not a matter of blood. It is a matter of culture. And it is also a matter of common will for driving a collective project for the future. The big question is how such a an heterogeneous country like Catalonia has right now, after the last elections in December last year, has right now an absolute majority in its parliament in favor of independence. according to the social structure I was describing before, we shouldn't have right now an absolute majority in our parliament in favor of independence, because if you focus on the social structure of Catalonia, taking into consideration that so many people have come from other regions of Spain or other countries of Europe and out of Europe, it is not quite logical that we have an absolute majority for independence, not only for the right of for self-determination, but this is the current reality of the country. And this is something that explains a lot of things. And probably one important thing that this phenomenon explains is that there is an ability to not only to attract people and to welcome people in our country. There is also an ability to integrate those people in the cultural mind of the country. The third message: are the trials in Spain against political and civil leaders weakening the principles of democracy? My answer is yes. These trials under the penal code are not fostering democracy in Spain and in Europe. They are weakening democracy in Spain and in Europe. In my opinion, and I was in office when all this process began. It was in 2012 approximately, when the huge demonstrations started in Barcelona and Catalonia. And we always tried to deal with this issue from the political point of view, because we knew for certain that the solution was a political one, not a judicial one. But in order to have a real dialogue, you need that the other party is really willing to sit down at the table and to start a dialogue accepting the reality of our current society. If you deny the reality, then the dialogue is not productive. You have to understand, you have to accept the reality, and from the reality, you have to start dialogue, negotiations, and try to reach agreements. And instead of trying this way, the logical way, to deal politically with a political issue, now we will have in Spain, in some weeks from now, we will have a trial under the penal code with political leaders in prison, behind bars, others in exile, as it has been said. And this is not the solution. Because although we have this very harsh situation, the reality is that 1 year ago, in December last year, when elections were called by the central government, with a turnout of 80% of the Catalan population, so a huge turnout, the outcome was an absolute majority in the Catalan parliament in favor of independence. So this is a real picture of our society today, of the ideas of the Catalan people today. Of course, the ideas of many Catalans, so several of them are in favor of self-determination and independence, others are against. And this is the essence of democracy. But the essence of democracy is not to try to solve political problems through trials under the penal code, accusing peaceful people of rebellion, this is to say, of violence. This is not the way. The fourth message: is the creation of new nation states compatible with globalization? And my answer is yes again. It is absolutely compatible. I would say that the more globalized is the world, the more decentralization we need. We are absolutely in favor, as I said before, during the meeting of the advisory board, we are absolutely in favor of a real European political federation. We think that Europe should go on and should go ahead in the process of more political power, Europe itself as a federation. But this federation should focus on real big things, real big decisions. And decentralization is perfectly compatible with this kind of political federation. In fact, this is a international trend. You can see countries that are deeply involved in the globalization process, and at the same time, they are also focusing on this domestic decentralization. How would an independent Catalonia be received by the European Union? Not very happily, but probably. But I think that the main issue is not how we would be received. The main issue is that for the European countries, it is difficult to be in favor of this process because it creates domestic problems and because it means a very big confrontation, very big dispute with Spain. But my theory is that the most difficult thing is the process to become an independent country. But if once we achieve independence, then we would be naturally accepted in the European Union. This is my opinion. And the last message I would like to share with you: are there political solutions to work out the Spanish-Catalan dispute? And my answer is yes again. There are solutions. But solutions have to be political solutions. Political prisoners should be released from prison, and our politicians in exile should come back to the country and have the possibility, they should be granted the possibility to politically find a solution. This solution is has to be I think my opinion, this solution has to take into account that the majority of the Catalan people want to vote on their political future. So, the referendum is not the main problem. The referendum is probably the only solution. How we'll be able to convince more than 2 million people in Catalonia, or maybe 3 million people, that political leaders will find a solution without the agreement of these people? It is not possible. People want to have the last say. And this is something that politicians have to understand and have to accept. When big issues are at stake, people want to have the last say. And the mission of politicians and political parties and political leaders is to find a way to let people vote. This is why I said that the referendum is the solution. Of course, an agreed referendum We don't want to take unilateral measures. I would like to insist on that issue. We don't want to take unilateral measures. We want to sit down at the table, start conversations, start negotiations, and reach agreements. But to do so, we need that the other party, in this case, the central Spanish political institutions, accept that the reality of Catalonia from the political point of view has changed, and now that we have a parliament with an absolute majority in favor of independence. This means that independence is something that has to arrive immediately to Catalonia. No, not necessarily, because nobody knows in a binding referendum if the supporters of non-independence would win the referendum. Nobody knows that. This is what happened in Scotland. This is what happened in Quebec twice. So it is not clear, but what is really clear is that people want to have the last say. So there are solutions from the political point of view. The attitude of the Catalan leaders is in favor of sitting down at the table and start negotiations. In this sense, I think, let me say this, I think that your help can be useful. The concept of cultural diplomacy can also be useful. And I think that if we are able to reach a good solution for Catalans and Spaniards, then this will be something. Will be something that will be also helpful for other cases, not only in Europe but in the whole world. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, I think that you can combine both things. Are we a nation? First question. Yes, we are. The will of being a nation stems from our ethnical attitude? No, absolutely no. Because, as I said, we are a melting pot. Catalonia is a real melting pot. When I said 70% of the current people living in Catalonia have non-Catalan origins, 70%, 7 out of 10. This is a piece of evidence that we are a melting pot. So, being a melting pot, almost 80% of the Catalan population are supporting the idea of a referendum, so the idea of self-determination. Not independence, necessarily, but self-determination, being a melting pot. Let me say that this is my personal theory. If the European Union were able to turn the Union into a real political federation, let's say the United States of Europe, according to the ideas of the founders 80 years ago, then my personal position would be, I would like that Catalonia could be like, let's say, Massachusetts. A political federation, you are a state within the federation. There are central powers in the federation and a large decentralization of powers for the states. But, and this is the second conclusion, if the European Union is not able to turn itself into a real political federation, then I would like to see Catalonia with the same powers as Austria or Denmark.